What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Trade to Black podcast, powered by Flowhub. You got me again. Shad is still down in Mexico. We're going to have Eric Berlin from Dentons come on off the top to talk about you saw the op-ed in Marijuana Moment, I think it was last week, about a one-plant solution between the hemp and the cannabis industries and really what regulation could look like moving forward. I know that there was also some news yesterday about the FDA notice hitting the register with the OMB. To be honest, to really dig into that, there isn't really much to be said there. There was no color in that notice. It was simply that it was around CBD regulation. I know that a lot of people want some sort of conversation or us to pull a rabbit out of a hat and be able to surmise what that actually meant. But I mean, I think Tom nailed it with his article that he wrote last night, is the fact that it was FDA, it was not CMS. It is up in the air and speculative whether or not it is pertaining to the EO. However, the FDA has been on the clock for some time now to create regulations and definitions around CBD. So this might be that first step forward. And also Gavin Newsom trying to take a little bit of Donald Trump's thunder, as he had mentioned that Governor Newsom was the president of the United States in a faux pas within one of his press conferences, said he would legalize marijuana. So, I mean, that was also something that was kind of just hitting the headlines today. But before we jump into it, going to do a word from our sponsors from Flowhub, and then get Mr. Berlin up here and kind of dive into this. So, I mean, if you're a serious cannabis operator, you already know margins are tight, compliance is complex, and execution matters. That's exactly why so many leading dispensaries across the country rely on Flowhub. Flowhub gives you real-time inventory visibility, built-in compliance, reporting, integrated payments, and powerful analytics, all in one streamlined platform. No patchwork systems, no manual workarounds. Whether you're scaling from one location to 5 or managing a multi-state footprint, Flowhub helps you move faster, stay compliant, and protect your bottom line. If ready to operate smarter and build a more efficient retail operation, learn more and book a demo at demo@flowhub.com today. So without further ado, let's get Mr. Berlin up here now that the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, Anthony. Nice to speak with you. How are you?
Good. Thank you for coming on. It was a good op-ed that you had in Marijuana Moment. I know we haven't had you on in a minute. Just wanted to catch up and kind of get your perspective. It was quite interesting. As we've had several people from several organizations on in the last couple of weeks, and we talk about hemp, we talk about the potential ban, we talk about what's going on in Texas, and the main argument, I guess, as far as I'm concerned in my seat, the main argument has been people want this extended. No one's really bringing forth a solution from a regulatory perspective. But I'm assuming the conversations you've been having and kind of like the rhyme and reason between this is to come up with a semblance of what a regulatory framework could look like if we get to, let's call it, a one-plant solution between hemp and the state-run cannabis industry.
Ultimately, Anthony, I mean, I think that's ultimately we want to get there. But I can say the purpose of gathering a lot of folks who have interest, invested interest in the industry, is to reach whatever consensus we can reach, to get as much agreement as we can get. And I think a lot of that is achieved by getting folks to recognize, like, why do they come into the industry? What do they care about? And then what does this industry look like, not later this year or even next year, but 5, 10, 20 years from now, really getting folks to think of a longer horizon. And what does cannabis look like in there? And as opposed to getting folks around with their company hats on and like, what's best for my company as I've positioned it and the assumptions that I've made about public policy and laws, how do we who care about cannabis view or desire the industry to look like in 20 years? It's not only that, but it's just, that's a good way of getting people to think more long-term. And to come up with more long-term solutions. So that's a lot of the purpose, is not necessarily to come up with like a piece of legislation. I'm not sure that that's where we're going to get, but at least it will achieve a more unified voice as the industry speaks to one another, speaks in the press, and speaks to elected officials. And what I want to add to that is this is an acute issue. I mean, what we hear constantly from elected officials is we don't even know what the industry wants, clearly. Like, it comes with all sorts of different voices, and they don't recognize who's from what. And I mean, they're just trying to figure out how to move forward. And that lack of agreement is one of many problems we have. You know, Anthony, I come on, and I think I've generally been a voice of optimism about the industry. Mm-hmm. But part of the issue is we have some serious headwinds now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to bum your audience out and list all of them, but I can list a bunch of them if you like. And we have some serious headwinds. And, you know, the folks who think that they can get everything, right? I mean, whether they are an advocacy organization, an industry organization, in the industry, mm-hmm. You know, no one is in a position to say, this is exactly how it should be done, and we want it this way, and we're not going to agree unless it's this way.
Correct.
And so what we're really trying to do is, and you saw it in the op-ed itself, of drill down to particular areas and take a long-term view and say, well, what does the regulation of cannabis look like in this, you know, in this 10-year horizon?
Yeah.
And get areas of agreement. Some of them are areas that I don't think are controversial at all, like age gating. And correct. By that, I don't mean criminalizing youth use, right? Mm-hmm. Age gating means trying to limit that access. So I think some of them, when your audience will look at them, will say, well, these are very, perhaps even obvious. And that's in part what we're trying to get back to, is mm-hmm. these areas of agreement without getting too hung up on like the exact how you get there and what exactly that is, because that's where you often get more disagreement.
How are you guys proposing, or how has the conversation been around creating cohesion within, let's say, the state-run cannabis operators and the hemp operators? Because I mean, there's been animosity in my home state. I mean, you had the hemp operators donating towards the anti-Amendment 3 campaign right. out in the public. I mean, they have been able to they've been able to operate under certain freedoms that state-run cannabis has not been able to operate under, due to it being a Schedule I and a regulated substance compared to hemp. And there hasn't really been a lot of accountability, at least from my perspective, on their side, or at least acknowledgement that the game that they've been playing for so long isn't the one that was intended via the Farm Bill. And it's time to regulate THC from a comprehensive perspective and rein it all in under one set of rules, which I think ultimately would make sense.
So I think that's a little bit about some of what the commission is saying. And I don't want to, I want to back off now and talk a little bit more, not about like what the agreement is, but what my kind of personal interpretation of that is a little bit.
Okay.
And that may be a good way of accessing it. So, let me actually, I'm going to answer a question. I promise, but I want to take one step back.
Yep.
To say none of what's going on right now is in my view, the ideal way that cannabis goes to market. I mean, first of all, let's acknowledge we have a persistent and very large illicit market. Mm-hmm. And that's one good sign that your legal market's not working as well as it should. And I don't want to get too deep into economics or anything else, but like we still have a huge illicit market. And so number one, let's not lose focus that we're talking about, you know, when we look at public policy, not if there's marijuana or if there's not marijuana. There's plenty of marijuana. Mm-hmm. And so it's a matter of how you regulate. And when you get into that, here's where there's tension. I believe in safe, legal, affordable access to cannabis. Yep. And it has to be all of those things. And where hemp went awry, and it's not everyone. There are many honest actors, but there wasn't always the promise of safety just because of how it was produced and how it went to market. I'm by no means suggesting everyone, so I don't want to get hate mail, but the bad apples made it hard for the good apples in that area. And then so you want safe legal access, and I personally want greater channels of access.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. So I had a panel that I moderated that was originally titled, before the appropriations bill, Hemp versus Marijuana, Can't We All Get Along? Right. And one way we can get along is to acknowledge where things are subprime, in a sense. So let me give you an example. The marijuana, state legal cannabis folks can say, and they can say fairly, that it's just unfair that they went through all those hoops and all the application process, and they're dealing with quadruple diversion control and 280 tax and all that sort of thing. And then just like next door gets set up the convenience store that's carrying very similar products.
Correct.
And I understand the hemp folks would say, tough luck, but I also think they have to realize they went to market on an unintended loophole. Yeah. And so people have to kind of step into each other's shoes, right, a little bit, and have a little bit of empathy when they have this discussion and think more about their immediate. And I can't sit here and say people need to think about more than their immediate economic interests. I mean, that's the country we have, and that's the game that we're playing. But you can think, for example, that if you're a marijuana company and your product isn't even sold in a state, that's not good.
Correct.
Right. And so to think about, maybe I do have access to that state in other ways might be good. So on the one hand, the marijuana folks felt that it's very unfair, as you said, that the hemp folks come in and take that market share without the costs and without all the other things going on. The marijuana folks, in my humble opinion, should recognize that the way marijuana is distributed right now is not ideal. The current dispensary model and the current fact that every state and even towns are different. Yeah. The fact that in order to buy cannabis in lots of places, you have to go and show your ID at the door and go through security and do all these things. And, it reminds me of the Woody Allen movie. It was Manhattan, where he says he's waiting in line to go to the movies and I'm going to have a stroke. It's just so it's not a great process. Many try to do it nicely, and I'm not lumping everyone in, but the notion that you have to do that to buy legal marijuana is one of the reasons why legal marijuana is not doing as well as it should be doing. And if we increase the points of access to that beyond the dispensary model, I personally think that's a good thing, but I understand that that's not in everyone's economic interest. But the folks who view it as not in their economic interest also are in a good position to avail themselves of those other points of distribution. So I want folks to look in a broader way beyond their immediate commercial interests. And many times when they take that longer view, they see that other path actually is in their long-term commercial interests. That's a great example, right? I mean, how do we get to greater access? It's your job as a manufacturer to get the products into the hands of people, and in this case, adults.
Correct. But at the same time, I guess, what is the strategy to get people to act in concert? Because I mean, what we've seen.
I think to take long term, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I did say I'd come back to your question, which is, once you have that perspective, and I'm not saying it works for everyone, it's not magic. It takes elbow grease, and it takes discussion, and it takes time. But when people see that longer view, and they get a little bit more unified in what this industry should look like in the long term, and we get unified behind things like, we want safe legal access, we want it broad, We want to take into mind consumer safety
Yeah, absolutely.
and youth access. I mean, these are like serious discussions to reach these kinds of points that are pillars for
Hmm.
moving forward. And a lot of the other things are window dressing as
Yeah.
opposed to pillars. And in many ways, it's getting folks to understand that. And it's not perfect, but I think when you step back and look at like, hey, we have these agreements and these are foundations for getting greater agreements, that, Anthony, is the process. And do we have sharp disagreements? Of course
Yeah.
we do, right? I mean, you when you're including all these different groups, you have groups that stand for no THC outside the regulated state industry, and you have folks who stand for, lots of
Yeah.
THC outside of that.
I
And
guess
those
in
are things
terms,
that are difficult to agree with. But here's the deal: is it comes to this in many ways. Like I personally think that we're not likely to see an extension of time for
tend
the
to
hemp
agree with you.
amendment.
Yep.
And I don't want to rule out anything, but I think people should be coming comfortable with the fact that we may not get anything other than language that would fix President Trump's CMMI program.
Hmm.
And if that's the case, then come December, we're all going to be in the same boat in a sense.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, what's going to happen in that industry is banks are going to become reluctant. You know what the story is after that.
Absolutely.
And so you asked the question of what that looks like. And I think we're far from achieving a unified answer to that, quite frankly.
Okay.
And I
I guess
think
what
we're
are
going
next
to have
steps? Well,
differences among states and some uncertainty on the federal side, because even if you don't get a change, of
mhm.
course, people will continue to push for a change after that period of time. So
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of uncertainties that create some problems, but at least if you can get folks talking about uh, about our similarities more than our differences.
Hmm.
That's another approach, right? And it's hard to talk about your similarities if you don't know what your similarities are.
Absolutely.
So
And there's a
this
lot
is
of
all a
similarities.
drill for us to understand not what are the points. Yes, we want to understand the points of disagreement, but let's
Hmm.
understand the vast areas of agreement. And when we do that, we see, and I'm hesitant to put a percentage on, but
Hmm.
like you get to kind of 80% agreement. And the 20% is that other stuff. And we may never solve that entirely. You're not going to get whole agreement, but at least there'll be decisions made based more on these pillars and these areas of agreement. And what we're trying to solve for is every time someone shows up uh, on the Hill, they're not greeted with frustration that there's no unified message from the industry. Like
Yeah.
at least now you have that list there and people can say what they want about it, but at least we can say these are unequivocal areas of agreement. And any law should include this, and we're all in agreement. I mean, you can sit and talk about where we agree, and that's a lot more effective than just trying to win out on the areas that you don't agree. Because
Absolutely.
honestly, I think this last round showed that a lot of effort that's put into that, if not done in the right way, is a fool's errand.
Yeah.
And
I
you can
would have to
spend a
agree there.
lot of time. You can spend a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money on these areas of disagreement. But in fact, what's going to happen in the long term is the areas of agreement will dominate and things will fall from there, I believe.
Like I said, Eric, to wrap on this notion, I guess what are next steps with the coalition? Like, are there firm next steps, like meeting with regulators, like furthering the conversation within these groups? And I guess what is the ultimate goal here? Because I do think that we need cohesion in terms of messaging as well as long term vision. But I mean, cannabis companies up until recent with their debt maturities, I mean, they were thinking month to month, quarter to quarter,
Right.
not really a 5 to 10 year time horizon.
I know I totally recognize that. And I recognize people can say like, what are you talking about? We're trying to live to tomorrow. Um, It still applies though, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
you're trying to live to tomorrow, there's nothing you can do on this front that's going to save you. I mean, there's
Mhm.
nothing, there's like, you know, if you're just trying to live past now, you need to be dealing with that. And you probably shouldn't be spending much time on this issue, quite frankly. I mean, I think everyone should, but so next steps are to continue the process, which has to continue, right? Because if you don't continue to have these discussions and do several things, one, focus on areas of agreement, but also really discuss the areas of disagreement so that we understand where the real disagreement lies. And I think there's a lot more work to be done on that. And I think in many ways, just having really good discussions among folks who are well educated in the industry is a good thing, right? I think it in many ways builds respect for one another. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do as well, right? Of just have this sort of a dialogue in a respectful, professional manner. And Anthony, I don't know, as I said, that the end goal is like a piece of legislation that we draft and hand up, right? It's really much more to highlight the areas of agreement and find productive ways for us to discuss the areas of disagreement. And lastly, to not lose sight that we don't really have a choice. I mean, I talked about the headwinds, or I alluded to the headwinds. There are very serious headwinds in this industry right now, and no one has the luxury of just getting it all their way. And so we have to be having the discussions of what we care about, what is politically practical, because we can sit and talk until we're blue in the face about things, but if they're not within the realm of politically possible, then we're wasting our time right now. And so the discussions have to include that, and have to include folks who have the credibility to be able to at least raise that as a real issue.
Well, I mean, Eric, I commend you for fostering the conversation, for obviously furthering the cause and creating this coalition and being active in the conversation, because obviously you're a subject matter expert all over the industry. And I mean, I look forward to having you back on in due time, and hopefully when next steps materialize, and I guess there's some more meat, we can have you back on and maybe start to talk about the participants that are in the group to a certain extent, and I guess what really is going to be the ultimate vision. But I definitely appreciate you coming on and giving us your time. And like I said, look forward to having you back once this starts to gain some traction.
Likewise. Thank you for having me on. Just one more thing I'd like to add, which is Adam, who's chairman of NCIA, is really the prime mover of what we've been discussing. And he's done a tremendous job. He's led with a tremendous amount of professionalism and credibility and compassion and empathy for other people's perspectives and patience. And I think that's all really important, right? I mean, people need to be heard. We need to have these discussions, and it's all with an effort of just pushing things forward. So thank you for having me on. Thank you, as always, for elevating the discussion about the industry. And it's really nice to talk to you, Anthony. I'm sure we'll talk to you again.
We'll talk soon.
Yeah, likewise. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Hope everybody got some value there. I mean, it's a noble cause that Eric's behind, and I mean, as well as the NCIA chairman, and I look forward to keeping tabs on that story, as well as starting to give some more coverage around their cause. But like everybody has been tuning in for, we got Boris Jordan coming up. We're going to talk about their latest earnings, talk about Europe, the overall footprint, and it usually dials in for a pretty damn good conversation when Mr. Jordan gives us his time. But before that, let's run that ad arms with Free Pouch, and then bring up Boris.
Hey everyone, with so much going on in the world right now, it's tough to keep up to everything that is indeed going on. From what's the latest in news, or what should I be following in the markets, to what should I be consuming on social media. The amount of information that goes on and on and on, it's endless. And when that happens, stress can definitely start to build up. And for someone like me, especially at my age, heck, I start losing my hair. And when that happens, I start questioning myself. Do I still have it? And am I focusing on the task at hand? And that's why I lean to free nicotine pouches. It keeps me focused. It makes me feel clear with clarity. I have all the confidence in the world like I'm 23 years old again, and I have a head full of hair. Oh yeah, baby. So if you want to own your own edge and stay sharp without lighting anything up, then log on to freepouch.com right now and save 20% by using the promo code TDR20 and get 20% off your next purchase. freepouch.com.
Hope everybody enjoyed that little snippet. I know everybody gets a good laugh out of Shad with the wig. Without further ado, Arns, let's get Boris up here and get into this. How's it going, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Good to see you. Good to see you. Congrats on the quarter.
Thanks. Was Berlin talking about the new commission, the hemp thing that's been recently formed?
He was talking about the op-ed that was him and the chairman of NCIA penned in Marijuana Moment. I don't think it's a formal commission. I think it's more of a consortium of commissions and associations.
Right.
My understanding.
Yeah.
So interesting stuff. But yeah, I mean, you guys had a hell of a quarter again. Largest top line in the industry. Once again, everything's humming. There's good news out of Europe.
I was excited about it. Things seem to be turning around for us in the U.S. I think that was my biggest pain point over the last year and a half. Really, the reason I stepped in as the CEO is I kind of, I was focused on the European business and I had other people focused on the U.S. business, and the U.S. business lost its way. And so we've done a huge lift here over the last year and a half, and it'll be almost 2 years. It's hard to believe, in August. And I feel like the company's doing well. So I could not be happier. I think you're going to see stronger quarters every quarter. At least that's what it's looking like now. The first quarter is looking very good for us. So I'm excited. Plus we're going into 420, and we got lots of new launches. So I'm excited about what's going on for a change.
The one thing you mentioned on the call that really caught my attention right off the bat was you had mentioned that the doubling of yield across the footprint. How are you guys achieving that? Is that a function of just tech and innovation that's going into the cultivation? Is that expanding capacity? Like what walk me through that, because that's a pretty.
It's putting a lot of things together at one time, so there's not any one thing.
Okay.
But first of all, it was hiring the right people. I had to bring in the right people that actually knew how to run, a 4 million square foot footprint of cultivation and manufacturing, which is very large. And it was not only in the U.S., but also in Canada and in Europe. So I had to bring in the right people. So we did that. And then on the back of that, we started to do the work. And there's technology in there, there's automation there, but really a lot of genetics work. I mean, one acquisition we never announced because it was a very small one, but it was probably the most important one this company's ever made. And that was the acquisition of Dark Heart, the genetics house that we bought in California about 4 years ago. And these are legacy guys that were in the industry way before the industry even went legal. That a lot of the strains, the most famous strains in the country that you hear about, were developed by these guys.
Okay.
And so we brought them in full time into Curaleaf. And those genetics, I mean, the level of genetics work that's being done now, and this is above my pay grade, Anthony, but the level of genetics work that's being done now really is incredible, right? It's, disease-free genetics that really focus on crossing the right strains, making sure you're getting the right terpenes, the right THC levels. So really, it's really about expanding and making sure you've got innovation and new drops on a regular basis. I think as of actually this month, this company in almost every state is going to have almost weekly drops of new strains, which is really cool. This has been in the works for 3 years now. And that really moved the whole company, because once you have the quality, then you can back it with marketing. I mean, we're also launching a whole new marketing campaign. I know that you're going to come for the Select. I'm glad to hear that. The Select launch in New York City, it's going to be a big deal. And that's just the start of a lot of things to come over the next 3 months at Curaleaf. So we've been parallel processing all of these things. So got to get your quality right first. You've got to get, after you get your quality right, that's the genetics. You've got to get your operations right. So you've got to get all the right things to get the operations right. You have to have the right equipment. You got to have the right automation, the right people. And then once that product hits the shelf, and we've seen a resurgence of people coming back to our stores, and mainly for our flower, then on the back of that, you can back it with marketing. Marketing product that's shit is you still got shit. You just blow a lot of money, right? You got to have a good product, and then you got to back it with the marketing. And I think that's where we are now.
I think you mentioned on the call as well that Dark Heart not only is contributing to efficiency throughout the footprint, but that's going to be leading premium flower, I think, in certain markets moving forward.
We decided to use their brand because their brand back in the day in California, way back in the day, Humboldt days, was a big deal. So we decided to bring their whole story forward in terms of what they did, a lot of the strains they did, and we're going to have really two streams of strains. I would say we're going to have what we call the legacy strains. These are the things that the cannabis industry was founded on, and then that they did, and now we're bringing in new strains which are more the current consumer, the newer consumer is looking for more fruit flavor, more terpenes, more taste than the legacy cannabis consumer. So we're going to have two lines of work here, and we're already seeing it. And we launched most of it initially in Florida as a test case, and you're there. I mean, our Florida sales have really come back really strong, and we've been gaining share every quarter, and we're very excited about it. And I think it has to do with the fact, and this is only the beginning. Literally, this year is going to be, by July of this year, our whole strain portfolio in our company is going to, I think we're up to we're going to make 84 strains, and we're going to be rotating in and out. So it's going to be very, very exciting for us. So things are sort of moving in the right direction. But technology, to answer your question, does play a big role. There's things like under canopy lighting that's super, that everybody used to light only from the top down. Now that helps. I mean, to be honest, that in and of itself brought a 25% efficiency to the gross. Just canopy lighting.
It was a pretty good segue because Florida was actually next up on my questions. Adult use looks like it's not going to happen this year. Like you said, Florida's clicking. You guys are capturing market share in the state. I mean, you are the second biggest player in the state from a retail footprint perspective. What is the strategy here? Is it fortified?
To be honest, I don't want to take credit for what's not true. Actually, Verano's has they have 80, I think, 2 stores to our 71. But we will finish this year at 90.
Okay. So what is the strategy with Florida? Continue to penetrate the state, continue to gain market share with the patient base, fortify that footprint with the ultimate goal being adult use potentially coming in 2028? Because, I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar market without adult use, and it's one of the healthiest markets, especially from a margin perspective in the country.
So I'm torn between two emotions on what happened in Florida. On the one, obviously, Kim really put a huge effort in, and I think that it was like it was basically like trying to row up the Niagara Falls because she had everybody against her, right? She had the state, the governor, people were just we can get into why that was the case, but the fact is Governor DeSantis made his position very clear early on that he didn't like adult use, and he's done everything to actually hurt medical as well, to be honest. So he has not been a team player on the cannabis side. So it was very difficult to get that done. On the business side, though, for Curaleaf, for instance, we're going to be much better prepared for any change that's going to happen. So our grow operations have been fully built out for adult use. However, our retail footprint was not built out. So I feel like, and we need to get the products in, get the right strains. And so I feel that we could actually use an extra year at least to get us to where we want to. Plus, the medical program does give us a little bit of a moat. Let's be honest, especially if the state starts to enforce against hemp. I think that's going to help us with growth on the medical side. So, we'd all love to get adult use. We knew it was going to be a very big jump for us. But from Curaleaf's perspective specifically, I feel that we could use the extra time to get our business exactly where we want it to be, so that when that adult use or a lessening of the rules on medical, which I think is more likely in the next 2 years, a loosening of the rules, I think that we'll be more ready for it. So, and that's my view. I don't know whether we're going to go for the ballot in 2 years. We have, as an industry, haven't talked about it, or whether we're going to try and lobby a lightening of the medical rules to make it more accessible, as your previous guest was talking about, making the product more accessible to people. And as you know, like Germany, for instance, it's still medical, but it's widely accessible because it's been made so by the rules by the country. So Florida could go in that direction as long as we have a governor. And listen, there's a lot of people running. We know their positions. There are some that are better than others, but for the most part, everyone is better than what we had.
Yeah, absolutely.
So no matter who wins, it's going to be better than what we had.
Yeah. And I mean, another multi-billion-dollar market that you have in the footprint's New York. How is New York? Is it emphasis on wholesale? Are you starting to see retail really flourish and the brands start to sell through? I mean, is New York thriving as well as people are telegraphing?
Yeah, New York is really good. I mean, listen, there can be improvements. As you know, that's my home state where I grew up. And so I've been probably the most active, kind of the way Kim has been active in Florida, or some of our Illinois colleagues were active in Illinois. You know, I've been the leader in New Jersey and New York in pushing regulatory change and legislative change, suing the governments, you know, on a regular basis. It's been a ride, but I have to say it's getting a lot better. First of all, I haven't met with him yet, but I'm really looking forward to the new head of the CRC in New York, or is it OMU? I forget that all these different guys, different initials, but I'm hoping to meet the regulator soon in New York. But I think the program in New York, we still have issues. We still have an inversion problem, a big one in New York. People are finding a way, even around the seed to sale regulation, to get their illegal product. I do think once this new head of the regulatory body gets confirmed, we're going to work with them. We're going to try and put a stop to that because that's, again, as your previous guest said, that's just an unfair and frankly unsafe practice. So I think we'll get there. But outside of that one issue, which I would say the OMU, New York is on a roll. I mean, New York is going to probably have 900 stores at the end of the year. I think it's going to exit over $2 billion in revenue run rate, probably 2.5. So it's well on its way to competing with California. And you know, I like our positioning in New York. We're the largest operator here. We've been here for a long time. It's where we started the company. We like New York.
A little bit of a curveball question, since you are in both markets and you have insights into both New York and Florida. If you weren't in either of those markets running Curaleaf, which market would you choose to go into, and why?
You know, they're dramatically different right now, right? So it's a very hard comparison because New York is a true adult use cannabis market with a less of a hemp problem, more of a illicit cannabis problem. Florida is a medical market, pretty highly regulated and getting more tough with a very big hemp component in it, right? So they're quite different markets. In New York, there's a lot of licenses out here, but less, I would say less quality cultivation. There's only 2 or 3 really quality cultivators that have invested in really large scale grow facilities. Whereas in Florida, there's more. So I think it's very hard to compare them. For Curaleaf, they're both going to be great markets. They're both $200 to $300 million businesses for us, and they're both high margin businesses at the moment, but they're very different. New York, as you said, you're right, is almost solely a wholesale market for us, whereas Florida is 100% of a retail market for us. So they're very different.
Hemp, you were one of the first people or one of the first CEOs to dive into the category. You led with the Select brand. I was a big fan of what you were doing. We've obviously seen that industry I don't want to say curtail itself, but it's looking at some serious headwinds. You exited the category. Some of your peers have gone deeper into the category, facing the potential ban and product lifts. I mean, what's your take on hemp right now? And if things were to change, would you ever consider revisiting and re-entering the category?
Listen, I've been around long enough, and you guys know that I go wherever the opportunity is. But I'm also someone that cuts my losses short fast. I don't sit on loss losers for a long time. And that was the problem Curaleaf had, in my opinion, with some of my predecessors that were running it before I stepped in, was they sat on loss-making businesses too long. I stepped in and I shut all that stuff down that wasn't working. And for me, I do not believe I did my work. I went to DC, spent a lot of time with the alcohol lobby, with all the powers that be. This thing is not getting reversed this year or even next year. Okay, it's just not happening. And I can't put Curaleaf into an industry that has anything illicit in it, because we have a target on our back as the biggest operator. And so whenever something goes wrong, the first knock on the door is a Curaleaf. And they come and check us. Like when the vape crisis happened, years ago, remember when people were dying of vapes, who did they come to? Curaleaf and Select to check our products. Now thank God we were clean and everything came out great. But the problem is they do come to us. So from that perspective, I made a decision that what I did was we were doing a lot of innovation. Like we were going to relaunch our seltzers. We had teas coming. We had all this stuff. So I kept the flavor team on board. I kept all the scientists that were doing those products on board. We are going to build our shelf in case the beverage business comes back. You know, I'm a big fan of beverage. I think beverage is going to be 50% of the cannabis business at a minimum. But right now, it's not the place to allocate capital in an environment where we still have 280E and where the cost of capital is so expensive that it just doesn't make sense. I'd rather allocate to those businesses that I know that are going to bring me a return than allocate to something that has a risk of being completely shut down in the next 6 months, what I believe is going to happen. Now, if it doesn't, I can relaunch. I have my own bottling a canning plant. I have all the equipment I need. Yes, I'm moving it from Kentucky to a different location right now to make it easier. But so I can relaunch. I can get back into the game. But I'm continuing to build a select brand around other things. But I don't see the return on capital and the risk associated with the shutdown as ones that I'm prepared to play in right now.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you. I don't think the hemp ban is going to be retroactively overturned anytime soon.
Yeah, and it was an interesting conversation. I listened in at the end of your conversation. I'm always been about having the industry talk to each other. But I will tell you, I believe the hemp industry brought this upon themselves.
They did.
They did. And they could have played by the rules the way we did, but they didn't want to. Everybody wants to make money fast these days. Nobody wants to build anything. Everybody wants to get rich fast. I've seen this in emerging markets in the past. I've seen this here. I've been around for a long time. I'm turning 60 this year. So, I have been in business for a very long time. I've built multiple companies. I've seen this game before, and it's not going to change. I don't know why humans don't learn from their previous mistakes, but we don't. They destroyed the industry for themselves, and they have only themselves to blame for it.
I totally agree with you. I could harp on this for a while, but you mentioned cost of capital. Last call with it, you got the largest bond offering pulled off, I think, in the history of the industry with the $500 million offering. How good did that feel? And I mean, is there any insight you could give us, I guess, into the profile of some of the new investors that did partake in that offering?
Sure. So it didn't feel as good as the one 4 years ago, Anthony, because I did that one at 8%. Okay.
Yeah.
So I did $450 million at 8%. And I think in the case of Curaleaf this time around, I think that, our timing, because of we're sitting here between the EO and the actual rescheduling, I think that created enough uncertainty that I couldn't get it done at a better rate. And one thing I know how to do is raise capital. I've always done that my whole life. I've raised billions and billions of capital for my companies. I know how to raise capital. I couldn't do that deal no matter what I wanted to at a better rate. But listen, the one thing I did do is I made it basically, it's a 3-year financing, but I can refinance after 2. So I cut my exposure to the higher interest rate to a much lower period of time. I raised some bank financing at 8% at the same time. So I've got a nice working capital loan that I can either draw on or not draw on. I can actually use it to repay some of the bigger bonds and keep that one drawn at 8%. So I've got different ways. I've got lots of flexibility. But listen, I think the biggest takeaway from that bond issue, and if you talk to the bankers that did it, they'll tell you, that was the most reviewed bond transaction in the cannabis space since its inception. So even when we had the craziness around Biden and everybody was throwing money at the sector, nowhere near the amount of investors that looked at any deal as they did this one. And what interesting is, I can't name them, but I can only tell you, we had investors that are subsidiaries, fund subsidiaries of money center banks in this deal. Okay. So that is unheard of. I can't talk about which ones, but I would tell you, if you knew which ones, you'd fall off your chair. So these are institutions that have said we'll never touch cannabis, are now $40-50 million investors in this bond issue. So I see that as a major positive. We brought in, I think, 120 or 130 of new money that has never invested in cannabis in this deal. And I think that that's a big deal. I do. I think that in the current environment, given the volatility, given the uncertainties, given the UTP issues on these balance sheets, the fact that we were able to bring in $130 million of brand new money from major institutions, I think speaks to the fact that confidence is building, that change is coming in the sector. And I'd like to pat ourselves on the back that they like Curaleaf and our positioning globally to be able to invest that kind of money. So all in all, you're never totally happy. I may not be happy with the rate, but I'm very happy with the quality of investors and with the size of the deal.
Do you think that in those investors' eyes, when they're doing the diligence and looking at the overall Curaleaf platform, that they do really take into account the value of the international business that is attached to it?
So listen, the one thing I will tell you that's always been the case since I started Wall Street in 87, is debt investors are much smarter than equity investors.
Yeah.
It's always been the case. Debt leads, equity follows. They do a lot more due diligence than any equity investor ever does, right? They spend a lot of time on this. So obviously they looked at, I would say the single biggest factor was the exponential growth we're seeing there. And that this, that could be $1 billion business in its own right outside of the US. And that we were the only player that was doing that on a fully vertical platform around globally. And we're now in Asia, we're in Europe, we're about to expand into Turkey, Spain, and France next year at the early part of the year as those programs get launched. And I think that they were excited about that. I do. I think it played a very large role. And then I think obviously the turnaround in the U.S. business helped because that was a problem. But I think it helped. And listen, we did 2.5 weeks of marketing. We started right after the New Year holiday. And listen, we were done by the middle of February. So I'd say pretty impressive from our perspective. I think my team came together. And obviously I thank all the investors that backed us. But now, money raising is not my key job. My key job is to make the business work. And so now I'm glad we're beyond that. And we're focused now on making the business work.
I want to dive into the European business, but before we get there, I mean, you do own a Canadian LP that you acquired. You're obviously creating a overarching global cannabis footprint. Do you ever see Curaleaf participating in the adult use market in Canada at all moving forward, years down the road, just to kind of link everything together if markets allow?
I think it's earlier than years. How can you not be in the largest international adult use market in the world, right? So Germany's nice, UK's nice, Poland's nice, Australia's nice, New Zealand's nice, Spain, all these markets will be nice, but the largest market in the world is Canada.
Yeah.
But I want to be smart about it, right? So we are looking, a team just returned, one of my business development teams just returned from Canada last week. Okay. We are looking, we are studying, we're investigating. We're just not going to do what we used to do, and that's just say we'll buy and that's it. We want to be smart about what we're doing, how we do it. We want to make sure there's synergies with our brand portfolios. We want to make sure there's synergies with our supply chain. So the answer to the question is we are definitely looking at it, and I think it'll happen faster than a few years out. But we will be in that market. We just want to do it the right way.
Okay, figured. Glad I asked. I mean, in terms of Europe, I know on the call you'd mentioned I think it did 50 million for the quarter. Obviously, there's exponential growth there. I mean, with the main growth being in Germany, how is the German market looking just from an internal perspective? I guess from your point of view.
So let me cover the positives and the negatives generally in Europe and in Germany specifically. So we have an issue at Curaleaf in that because that we have a U.S. business that investors are used to having a 50% gross margin. For us, we have to be very careful in how we expand globally, right? Because the global market doesn't have any of the restrictions, for instance, on product supply that the U.S. does, right? There's no moats, right? You can grow in Africa, you can grow in Macedonia, you can grow in Thailand. You can grow in Canada, you can grow in Uruguay, you can grow anywhere and ship to Europe, as long as you meet the GACP or the EU GMP standards, depending on the market you're in. So there's a shit ton, excuse my expression, of product that's hitting those markets at very low price. I'm talking about prices that you could not believe you couldn't make money on. And a lot of the growth is going to those products. A lot of the
Okay.
people are buying because it's just cheap. They're buying those products. Curaleaf does not play in that segment. So,
Okay.
for instance, we just do some M&A deals recently. I'm not going to name them, and the financial results of those companies had to be released, and they're European businesses that have been bought by various companies. We look at their margins. I mean, their gross margins are under 20. Even though they're announcing higher ones, they're under 20%. Their EBITDA margins are 2 to 3%, if they're even there. I mean, Curaleaf's are 45% real gross margins and EBITDA margins of 16. So it's still because we're scaling, it's still a drag on our overall earnings. But I'm not playing in that lower tier product. So my growth is only in either the formulated or the top tier products. So when you look at the overall market in Europe, it's growing faster than I'm growing, but that's by design because I'm going for profitability rather than for market share. But even with that strategy, I'm still the biggest player in all the markets except for Poland, because that's a new market for me, than anybody else. I'm the largest player in Germany, absolutely the largest player in the UK. So, but our focus is on profitability. So, for instance, this year, we anticipate growth for us, not for the European market, for us to slow. Because we think that these regulators are starting to get on top of these illicit products that are entering the European market, but it's going to take them some time. So I suspect that this year, even though we're starting, finally, we saw enforcement yesterday in Poland, the license was taken away. We know that Germany's about to change some rules to enforce. UK, there was an article recently, a couple of licensees are about to lose their licenses, but these things take time. So we're going to focus on the profitable, high margin products in order to get our product range out there. We're not going to chase the lower. Now in 27, we expect growth to go parabolic because of the new markets that are entering, right? But in 26, we were growing last year 64%. We're anticipating growing 25 to 30% this year. Again, not because the market's not growing, but because that's a choice Curaleaf is making in what segments we want to play.
Okay. I mean, you're still talking $40 million potentially in the growth of the business unit, so it's still meaningful. How big can the UK be? Like, I feel like the UK is probably one of the most misunderstood cannabis markets from at least an American investor's perspective in the EU. Like, we hear there's medical. A lot of people think that there's recreational, which there obviously is not. But how big can that market be, and when do you think that market really starts to figure it out?
It's the smallest market of all the markets. So just to give you an idea, it's got less than 100,000 patients, and it's a 60 million population country. And the problem in the UK is it's got the hardest process to get a card. Because you have to first of all go to a panel of 3 doctors, not 1, but 3. And then you have to have tried 2 other medicines for your condition that didn't work for you to use cannabis.
Okay, so it's truly an alternative.
Yes.
It's not even,
Which is different. Like, that's what Germany was like too, which is why Germany was stuck at 100,000 patients. And now it's 1 million. Because Germany, what they did was they made it a primary medicine rather than a secondary medicine. So the UK is the biggest sleeper market there is. Now, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of prohibitionists there as well that are trying to fight it. But I see the biggest upside short term in Germany and Poland, medium term in the UK.
And are you evaluating France and Italy, or are they too early right now and it'll come?
We're in Italy, but the law there is very restrictive. It's still small, but I do think that Italy is going to change soon. We're, I think, one of the bigger operators in Italy, probably in terms of our product, but we're talking about, less than $1 million in revenue in that market, right? For Curaleaf. So it's really not a big deal, although we're about to expand our partnerships there. I think that the biggest markets, of course, are going to be Spain, France. Now, Spain and France are going to initially launch only with tinctures. That's okay. That's how they all launch. They want to get over the stigma and make sure it's safe. And then I think in 12 months, they'll start moving into other products. Turkey's the big one. Turkey's going to launch with vapes and tinctures and edibles, not flour, but everything else. So Turkey is going to be very exciting. And as you know, We're the only, and it's 87 million people, and we're already building our facility there. Turkey was one country that you had to manufacture the products in Turkey. That's the rule they have. But what's exciting about it is that we're the only internationally licensed operator. And so I really feel that already we're getting most of the local guys that got licensed are coming to us and saying, can we process through you? Can we manufacture through you? Okay. So it's an exciting market for us.
Have you evaluated Thailand or Southeast Asia, or are they just two nascent markets? And I've heard the Wild West over in Thailand.
Thailand's a difficult market. First of all, they change the rules every 2 weeks there. So it's very hard to commit serious capital. Two is there's a lot of illicit cannabis that's grown out of Thailand. So you're competing against a very, very developed illicit cannabis market.
Okay.
And so it's a difficult one for us to look at. But, Australia also is going through a very big pain point like Canada went through. So we're waiting. We're there. We're selling products, but we're waiting for that market to reset the way Canada's kind of resetting now. We're waiting for Australia to reset before we go more aggressively into it. So
do you have domestic production in Australia, or are you exporting from Canada?
No, we either Canada or Portugal.
Okay. So you can go from Portugal into Australia as well.
Oh yeah, I can go from Portugal. I have two manufacturers. So I grow my indoor cannabis out of Canada, and I grow my greenhouse cannabis out of Portugal.
Okay. And then coming back to the States, I mean, I don't want to jump into rescheduling and go around that whole thing. We've all speculated on it. It is what it is. Pam Bondi, I think, is going to come and ring the register when she's good and ready. If we do get rescheduling, which markets that you're not in right now excite you in the States, or which geographies are you looking at right now to where you're like, that is where we're going to plant flags and grow moving forward?
So Anthony, I'm just going to correct one thing. We don't need to get into rescheduling, but just what you said, it's not if. We're going to get rescheduling. And yes. I'm now happy to say that. I wasn't even 3 months ago, but I'm pretty much happy to say we are going to get it. It's a question of when, not if.
Okay.
And I think that the government is diligently working on the approach. And I think that on the back of the tariffs, the mandate that was given is this can't be reversed. Yes. So I think they're doing their job. And obviously, we're privy to more information that we can talk about. But I can tell you, people are working on it. This will happen. I can't pick the timing. And if I told you I can, I'm a liar. Because I think they don't even know what the timing is yet. But I can tell you there is urgency on the matter. And it's not only at the DOJ, it's from the White House, it's from Congress. There's urgency on the matter to finally get this thing across the line. So that's what we're doing. So I think that's going to happen. In the U.S., it's not 280E that drives me. I look at, there's two markets that Curaleaf's not in, and it's my bad, and that's Virginia and Texas. And Texas, I can wait a little bit on because that's going to take some time, but I definitely want to be there. Virginia was a miss by Curaleaf, and we had multiple opportunities to get it done, and we weren't, in the beginning we were dismissive of it because we thought it was too far out, and then later on we just had some bad luck, as you know, with that deal that we did at the end of last year, where a creditor came in over above us and took the asset, and you can't compete with a creditor because they own the debt, so they're always going to win. So they got to put up a lot less money than if someone that's coming to buy. So from that perspective, those are two markets I want to be in. Listen, I think there's going to be a lot of M&A this year. I can tell you it's already happening. I think there's going to be, we all talked about consolidation in the past. I'm telling you, it's happening now, and it's not going to happen only with tuck-ins. I think you're going to see it at the top levels as well, because it has to happen. It makes no sense to keep these companies separated, because consumer products is economies of scale. Yeah. And you need to create those economies of scale and synergy. Why do you need to have, Trulieve, GTI, Cresco, Verano, Ascend, all these guys in one market, right? We all have the same costs, the same overhead costs, the same service center costs, everything. If you get rid of that, like if you merge two, I calculated that if you took two of the large MSOs and you put them together, you'd save $200 million within 12 months. $200 million.
Yeah.
given the leverage in the sector and given everything else, wouldn't it be nice to flow $200 million to the bottom line?
Very much. I was going to say, does that work in a post 280 world, or does that work today?
I think it works. That synergies has nothing to do with 280.
Okay.
Synergies is all about just efficiency of the operating business.
Okay.
280E is just is icing on the cake. But let's see. Let's say we get 280E. We don't know how the historical UTP is going to be treated, right? So some level of negotiation will take place, but there's going to be some payments that are going to have to be made over a 10-year period.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how quicker you can clean up your balance sheet from UTPs if you merge these things? 280E in many ways, in my opinion, is going to force consolidation because people will finally have to sit down with the IRS and deal with the UTPs.
That's going to be a clip from the show, so I'm sure you'll see that on Twitter tomorrow. That might be the clip of the show. I guess in closing, how are you looking at 2026 for Curaleaf? We're looking at a potential transformational year for the industry. We've seen Curaleaf transform since you've taken over the helm. I think it was probably about a year and a half ago. What is the focal point for 2026, and how do you think we'll be looking at Curaleaf in January, looking back on 2026?
Listen, 2026 for me is return to growth, right? So I took 2024 and 2025 to clean up. I did no acquisitions. I really focused on cleaning, getting the company in good shape, getting our product range right, getting our quality right, making sure we had product where we needed it, getting our branding right, which is what you'll see now coming over the next couple of months. That was my focus for 2020. This year, it's about returning to growth. We saw our first growth quarter in the fourth quarter where we grew year over year for the first time in, I think, a year and a half, 2 years. So I feel good. We're going to grow domestically and we're going to grow internationally. And I think that's a lot in a price compression environment to be able to grow and maintain your margins. And I think that's the secret of Curaleaf in 2026 is that not only are we going to grow, I think others will grow because there's going to be a lot of M&A and stuff, but I'm talking about organic growth. Even take out M&A. Curaleaf's going to organically grow this year, and we're going to maintain, if not improve our margins. And that's what I'm really excited about.
That's a mic drop. I mean, Boris, I appreciate it. This is always obviously a good conversation. It's one of them that I truly enjoy. I definitely appreciate you giving me your time, and I look forward to having you on next quarter.
And sorry about last 2 weeks ago. I literally spent 8 days, first time in my life, in bed. I was so sick. I caught some freaking virus. I couldn't even lift my head out. So
no sweat. I definitely appreciate you making good on it and coming on and giving people what they want. Like I said, I look forward to having you on next quarter.
Thanks, Anthony.
Conversation. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Well, hope everybody enjoyed that. It was quite insightful. Boris was a little more colorful in terms of the rescheduling talk than I was expecting. But I hope you got some value from that, got some takeaways. I'm sure you'll see some sound bites that Guap will clip up for Twitter tomorrow. And we'll be back tomorrow. Shad will be back next week. So I've got the helm on Wednesday and Thursday. And I will let everybody know who the guests are going to be for the rest of the week, with the exception of Adam Stetner will be on with me on Thursday. So appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And I will see everybody tomorrow.
Hey everyone, thanks again for watching here today. Listen, if you're getting value from us here at TDR, make sure to check us out at TDR Plus. It's our exclusive membership community. Why? Well, you'll see CEO interviews that go beyond business, showing a personal side that you won't find anywhere else, including the biggest names of the industry. Plus, you'll get insights from analysts and day traders on where the industry's headed, both short-term and long-term, and a direct chat group with our team. It's only $7 a month, just 25 cents a day, and it helps support everything we do here at TDR. If you want to join, just click the join button below and become a TDR Plus member today. And once again, a big thank you for being part of our community. So that's it for today. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.